solo. Welcome to our national broadcast. For the last almost 20 years, I have been a broadcast owner of stations across the country. And the government agency that regulates us is the Federal Communications Commission. And you hear all these things about the commissions and the biases and whatever, but our guest today has had probably more of an impact on our industry in terms of being fair to us as broadcasters and always being fair. I have such respect for this person. She didn't always issue directives that I always liked, but she was always fair. And it's such an honor for me to have Barbara KREISMAN on today, who represents a generation of public servants who witnessed nearly every major transformation in communications, from dominance of broadcast television and radio, to cable, to satellite, the internet, social media, streaming, and now artificial intelligence. Her perspective as our exclusive guest today will help our audience understand not only where this industry has been, but where it is going. She was the former Federal Communications executive for media, and now she's also a media consultant. I cannot welcome you and tell you what a joy it is to have you on today. Thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, thank you for having me. I love your show, your viewers. Thank you.
Yeah, when we look back at your years at the FCC, what do you consider the most significant changes in the communications industry during your career?
Well, there have been so many of them. I guess, when I first started, it was over-the-air TV. That was the focus. You had 4 basic channels that people watched. And over the years, it's all the competition with cable, with streamers. I think that's the biggest change. The whole media landscape's changed with respect to opportunities and choices for the viewers, and that's a good thing.
For us as broadcasters, we sometimes think that people don't understand our survivors, especially when it comes to the NFL and sports. These technological companies that can expand across the entire country, but yet we've always been limited in how we could expand. What do you think about the survival of broadcast television?
Everyone always has declared over-the-air TV broadcast is dead, but I don't believe that. I believe more and more people understand there's an opportunity to cut the cord from cable, for example, or direct TV, and combine over the air with streaming. So I don't see that it's dead, and I hope it's not, because I think it's a really great alternative for the American public. I think that broadcast TV is under certain constraints. Because of the origins of broadcast TV, they're required to do certain public service programming, and they often complain about that. They say it's not profitable. So maybe we have to take a look at that. Maybe it is too stringent, but I don't think it's dead, and I don't think it's going to be dying anytime soon, as long as we maintain some of our basic rules, and that is limiting the amount of ownership a particular station owner can have, and that's up for grabs right now. Your industry argues that a particular owner has to own more, but I think one of the beauties of over-the-air TV is the diversity it presents, the diversity of viewpoint, and that's what you miss on the internet. People tend to listen to pods and watch programs that reflect their own views, and they never have the opportunity to hear the other side. And that's what broadcast TV has the opportunity to do, give you 2 sides.
How has the FCC's mission evolved as technology has moved from traditional broadcasting and telecommunications to, let's say, the digital platforms, the streaming services, and the artificial intelligence?
I think we try to be cognizant of those changes. But I think as many times, I think we lag behind. I think we lag behind changing our rules to understand those changes. And I think that might be part of the tension that you see now in some of the rulings of the Commission.
How did you get started, and how did you end up at the FCC?
DJ. I was a DJ. In college, I was the DJ. And I loved, I had a little TV show in my college. I guess from there, I thought, well, actually my first job was going to be with a Dick Cavett production company in New York, but I couldn't really afford to go to New York, and I couldn't afford to live in New York, and at the same time I had applied to law school and had complete scholarship there. So it was just the easier turn. That's how I started. I started and then combined them both, post-law school with a job at the commission.
You know, it's quite a testimony to you that even after you retired over a year ago, they still need your expertise, they need your experience. You still remain a consultant to the FCC.
And I swore I wasn't going to do that. You know, before you retire, you think, what am I going to do? And I thought, well, I retired, it'll be a year in August. And I thought, well, why don't I give myself a few months to just sort things out, get things caught up with respect to, you know, my house and my daughter's house. And then I was approached by a broadcasting company about providing them strategic advice. And I thought, well, why not? And what's good about that, it's not a lot of work, but it makes me keep up to date with what's going on. And also then I was really lucky in that, and actually really fortunate that the National Association of Broadcasters called me and gave me this lovely honor just a month ago. They flew me out to their convention and had a beautiful ceremony and gave me one of their leadership awards. And what a beautiful way to cap a career. It was just a blessing.
And your acquiring a law degree at such a young age has been a very critical weapon for you throughout your career.
I think having a law degree, and especially my daughter, for example, she really didn't want to go to law school, but I said, I don't care if you're a lawyer, but the education is really helpful, no matter what you're going to do in your life, and I recommend that to your viewers. If you can get that education, especially if you're a woman, I think it gives you a little bit more armor in being successful for the rest of your life.
Barbara KREISMAN is our guest. I'm Armstrong Williams, and we'll be back. Explain your role at the FCC and the Media Bureau.
Okay, I was part of something called the Senior Executive Service, a career job. Mine was not political, it was career. And my job was to implement the policies of whoever the chairman is. Didn't matter if it was a Republican or a Democrat. That's what basically my job was. As chief of the video division, our job was to take the policies or whatever the direction is of the chairman and implement it in a way that's consistent with law. That basically was my job. And it's really interesting dealing with Republicans and Democrats. I found that over the years, it's the Republicans that tend to use the staff of the FCC more integrated into their goals. And the Democrats seem to bring in a layer of people between them and the staff. Just an observation, not good, not bad, just an observation.
You know, what do you see as the challenges? You know, are the current communication laws keeping pace with this technological innovation, Barbara? Or is Congress falling behind the realities of the marketplace? And also, what lessons today should regulators learn from previous periods of technological disruption?
I think that they have to pay attention. One big issue before the commission now is next-gen TV. And no one is against next-gen TV, but the question is whether it should be a new standard like the DTV transition was, and whether the proposal before the commission now is that broadcasters no longer have to put on the 1.0, the signal that gets to everybody. And that's a really big deal, and I don't think Congress is paying attention to how big a deal that is, that their constituents, if in fact this gets passed, could disrupt their viewers, their constituents. The NAB will argue that there's great benefits in 3.0, but there's a whole body of work that indicates there's a problem with it. Not a problem with having it as a supplement, but with a problem with having it as the way you get your signal. I mean, my TV doesn't have 3.0. I don't think I want to go out and buy a TV that has 3.0. You know, when the DTV transition was here, I knew that was going to be successful, because you know why? Everyone would want that flat screen TV. No one would want that big bulky thing. And the picture was so much better. I don't see that as a viewer with respect to this 3.0 signal. So that's controversial. I mean, it's going to be you.
But there are a lot of broadcasters that support. Of course, I'm a little.
Yes, you're prejudiced in favor.
I'm a bit prejudiced in favor of 3.0. Of course I am.
But I don't know if all your viewers are going to be able to get it. I'm not against it. I just think maybe you shouldn't be able to drop the 1.0 signal. That's all.
So let me, when you and I were talking about having you on the platform, there were some things that you were very excited about that was happening in this space and the kinds of things that you look forward to. Talk about those things.
Well, always the development of opportunity, more opportunity for broadcasters. We're looking for opportunity for broadcasters. We want you to be successful, right? We want you to be able to make a living. We want you to be able to, so we want to look at the best signal that you can provide. We want to look at the area that you can, the service area, to expand it or make it as efficient as we can. So I think that's a goal. The goal is to keep, there are some broadcasters now that really specialize over the air. But we also want you to be able to compete with the streamers and with cable.
Listen, I know there's always this argument about minority broadcasters. And I know that has been a goal for the Federal Communications Commission. How realistic is it?
Well, we had once a good policy. There was a tax certificate policy, where that a broadcaster, if they brought in or sold to a minority broadcaster, an independent minority broadcaster, they could get a particular tax benefit, and that was eliminated by Congress.
But some saw it as racism.
Yes, yeah, but it was pretty successful. So I don't know how realistic it is. I think diversity is a good thing. Diversity, not that you have to change your standards or lower them or anything like that, just diversity of competent people, smart people. I think you have a better, you have a better dialogue if you have people from different races and backgrounds together.
But can you do that without having it at the expense of others?
Maybe, and I think that's the argument now, maybe. I think that the problem is not the idea, the problem is the way it was implemented. I think oftentimes it was implemented like a quota system. So then the answer is yes, that hurts other people. But the goal is good, maybe the implementation was bad.
What do you feel are the biggest misconceptions about the FCC?
We're not against, at my end, when I was there, I certainly wasn't, I wanted to work. One reason I loved my job is that I really liked broadcasters. I thought that as a people, there were people who cared about others. There were people who really wanted to get into the community. They really wanted to report the news in an honest way. So we weren't the bad regulators coming in. We were like, we wanted to be a partner. And there are a number of ways we were able to partner. We were able to help people expand their area. We were able to get service on Indian reservations. We were able to make some exceptions so public TV could get into areas of the country that didn't even have hardly any service. So I think maybe a misconception is that we're the big bad guys, but we really weren't. We really wanted to be a partner and doing what we could for the public. I had several constituents, I thought. One was the public itself, and then broadcasters. And my goal was to make those two things work together, and that would be a big win for everybody. Not to get in a fight. I mean, nobody wins in a fight. Nobody wins if you have to go to court and you have to fight about this and that. But to get everybody working together for a common goal.
Well, what do you say to your critics who feel that the FCC caters to big tech giants at the expense of local broadcasting?
It may be so. It may be so. The big tech people, the bigger, not tech people, but the bigger broadcasters have a lot of influence with the legislatures. They have a lot of money. They can afford long legal fights.
So the big tech giants.
Yeah, the big techs too.
Well.
Yeah, the big techs too, right?
Yes, of course. They have much more money than we have.
They do have more money, but they didn't get their spectrum for free at the beginning. That's where we go back to the beginning.
But we own the spectrum.
Yes.
We made a sacrifice in the beginning.
Well, maybe so, but no, actually, we own the spectrum. The public owns the spectrum.
Yes,
you don't
true.
own the spectrum. The public owns the spectrum, and that's where
we the people.
We the people own the spectrum,
we the
right?
people.
And that's where it gets a little shaky. Because I've gone to schools and I say, all these signals are coming into your house on the same TV, but these signals here have to comply with certain requirements, public service requirements. They can't use profanity in certain ways, blah, blah, blah. And that's because they got their spectrum free many, many, many years ago. But these cable guys, they can do all that stuff. And it doesn't really totally make sense in our present environment, does it?
Yeah.
It doesn't really make sense. It's hard to explain.
And we'll be back with Barbara KREISMAN. Don't go away.
Oh
yeah, I know we're live. I know we're live. You know, so I want to continue what we were talking about.
Okay.
I was talking about why I think, as broadcasters, Howard Stern Holdings was so successful at FCC, because we did not hide behind our lawyers.
You made it successful. You would come in, very gracious, always happy to have a moment to talk, explain what you were going to do, explain how the issue was important to you, just talk generally about the market. And you were always extremely gracious and very knowledgeable.
And that's important, because I know sometimes people just think that these sidecars are just a shelf or something else, and you have to put a face to it. You got to earn the respect. Listen, like I said, our relationship with the FCC couldn't have been better, and it had a lot to do with you. And it's always about, we're human beings first. And there may be things that you may not have understood, and when we explained it, you were willing to listen to it. We did not always agree on how we get to our goals, but we made progress, and I think that's very important. If you were serving at the FCC today, Barbara, what issue would be at the top of your priority list?
It's tough for me to answer that question because, like I said, I would have to follow the lead of the current chairman. We're not independent. In other words, if the chairman tells me we're supposed to ask Disney for early renewals, that would be my job to do that. And I read today in the paper they filed under protest their renewal applications early so they could be looked at by the commission. So it wouldn't be my issue. I would have to implement the issues of the chairman.
So let me ask you a different question. If you look ahead 10 years, what will the communication industry look like, and what developments will most surprise the public?
Wow, that's a hard question. I don't know. I think it depends how the streaming industry develops, if they ever are regulated. Right now they're not regulated, and they fight not to be regulated, which I certainly understand. The streamers seem to be gaining a real good hold, on what people watch, certainly in my household, and how that impacts the programming. It seems like it's going to be driven by programming in part, and how that affects the programming of the major networks. I remember having a friend who then worked at CBS saying what they care most about their programming, more than their independently owned stations. They care more about the programming and the rights associated with that programming.
Here's a big question. Is the NFL a monopoly?
I can't answer that question. I can't answer that question. I'm not touching that pro sports stuff. No. You get big trouble if you handle that sports
Let me ask you, has America lost something as media has become more nationalized and less local? That's the beauty of us as broadcasters. We are local. We take care of our community first. And that's why they respond, that's why they watch, and that's why we're successful. It's because we believe in localism first.
I think you need a combination. I remember in the children's TV area, people used to say, oh, we got this local programming, but it wasn't very good. So sometimes if you can nationalize something, you can put more resources in it, and the quality of your product's better. But it's also great to have, I always watch our local stations. I like to watch the news. I like to watch what's going on in my community. So I think you need a combination, right?
Yes. We're going to come back with some final thoughts with our very special guest, Barbara KREISMAN, and she's not going to talk about the NFL, whether it's a monopoly, but I'm going to tell you it is, and it needs to be reined in. We'll be back. Don't go away. You know, let's talk about your legacy and your service to something that you not only believed in, but the FCC is actually a much better place as a result of the fact that you gave so many decades of your life to that career.
I always tried to mix with the industry. I always tried to go to the NAB conventions or any place that I was invited and the FCC allowed me to go, because I thought it was important to mix with the industry, to hear everyone else's viewpoints and also to explain ours. You mentioned it, your people first. And my idea about the job was, you would want someone, I want to treat somebody as I would want to be treated. And that's how I always felt when I was in my job. I never wanted to, I heard people being snobby, or I always wanted to return calls, be as polite as I could. If I couldn't do something for somebody, I'd explain to them why. And if they told me they had to go above my head, I understood that. I appreciated them letting me know. But that's what I hope would continue. I hope that the people who follow me in my job, and that was David Brown, also gets out there and realize there is importance of getting out of the office and talking to people in a more casual way, and attending the events that we're allowed to attend. We have to go through this ethics thing all the time, which is appropriate, but that's what I think is important, because you get various viewpoints.
You know, I will say this about you. You know, people like to talk about the political persuasion of people at the FCC. To this day, I have no idea what your politics are. Left, right, you're always neutral, always a referee, always fair and even-handed. That was so important.
The video division was really interesting because we had a mix. You know, in DC, you have more heavily Democratic staffers. But in video division, where we handled the big transactions, we were very mixed. And that was very helpful, because I had a viewpoint, and that I'd always hear the viewpoint of the more conservative staff people. And sometimes, I remember there's one time it was an issue.
Yeah, you hear that music, so
yeah. Oh.
Thank you,
Okay.
thank you, it's okay. I wanted to hear this story, but we'll have you back.
Thanks.
Thank you for joining us. Learn more about the FCC.